Hello, and welcome to the shop. Here we have everything from the insane to the... I'm sorry, what was that? Ah, you heard screaming. No, none of that here. Perhaps you should hurry home. It's awfully dark tonight, and this storm doesn't look like it'll be letting up. Well, I suppose that's harder for me to deny, isn't it? Put that phone away. There is no need for the police. I assure you, those sounds from upstairs aren't anything malevolent. Just the latest item to be added to our catalogue. Truth be told, my assistant and I thought we were receiving a fairly uninteresting cupboard. Yet, here we are. Tell me, have you ever heard of such a thing as a screaming skull? No? Why don't you take a seat? Given what's upstairs, I think you'd rather be comfortable for this. Many old English houses have stories involving a so-called screaming skull. Generally, something bad tends to have happened to an occupant of the house, and the unfortunate soul makes some specification about what should happen to their remains. If their instructions aren't followed, then strange happenings start to occur. Perhaps an example will illustrate my point better. Burton Agnes Hall is a large residence designed adhering to the principles of Tudor Renaissance architecture by Robert Smithson. Its beautiful exterior and gardens are expertly crafted in order to show the wealth and power of those who call it home. However, inside its walls lurks a tale of terror that has repercussions for even its modern inhabitants. Sir Henry Griffith commissioned the hall as a place to live with his daughters during the 1600s. The youngest of his children was Anne, who was reportedly so taken with its beauty and design that she could talk or think of little else. Just before Burton Agnes was finished, Anne went on a short trip. Upon her return journey, she was attacked by thieves a little while away from the building, and they left her in a terrible state. She was duly transported to her home and remained mostly delirious over the coming days. However, her sister stayed by her bedside and would listen to her fever-induced ramblings. One thing she insisted was that part of her was to remain at Burton Agnes after her death, specifically her head. To appease their dying sibling, they promised they would, and soon after this, Anne passed away. Naturally, the sisters did not want Anne's severed head to remain in the house, and so buried her whole body in the cemetery of a local church. However, it soon became clear that this was a mistake. Like my friend upstairs is kindly demonstrating, disturbances started to occur within Burton Agnes. Bangs and crashes would ring through the hallways in the middle of the night, accompanied by sightings of Anne's ghost, which was most frequently seen in the Queen's state bedroom. In an attempt to stop these occurrences, the sisters had Anne's body exhumed, and this is where hearsay may have crept into this tale. Some say, once the body was dug up, her torso and lower body were all perfectly preserved. However, her head was bare of all flesh and detached from the rest of the corpse, as if ready to be taken back to the hall. Make of that what you will. In any case, once the skull was returned to Burton Agnes, the paranormal disturbances ceased. Years went by, and eventually new owners found themselves living in the hall. The skull was still on display, but after the new inhabitants had visions of grinning skulls torment them on a nightly basis, they decided to bury it in the garden. It was unwise to do this. Anne's ghost returned with a vengeance, and the nightly disturbances increased tenfold, with screams heard throughout the house. The owners returned the skull inside, and eventually it was placed in a secret location within one of the walls. Some rumour this location to be behind the panelling in the Great Hall, but I think the general consensus is that it's probably best not to go hunting for it. Not convinced? How about I tell you of another? There is a tale of a skull in Dorset that can still be seen today if you want something a little more tangible. You do? Good. This tale begins with a man called Azariah Pinney, who was going to be executed in 1685 for high treason due to his involvement with the Monmouth Rebellion, which aimed to overthrow James II. Luckily for Pinney, it sounds like money being passed into the right hands may have saved his life, for instead of being executed, he was sent off to a plantation in Nevis as a slave. However, his fortune soon turned, and by the end of the 18th century, he had shaken off his status as a slave and owned a sizable plantation. There the Pinneys stayed for a number of years, before eventually selling all their property on Nevis and returning to England. Specifically, they were returning to the family home, Bettiscombe Manor. With them, they brought one of their slaves, so that he could continue to serve the family back home. However, the slave soon became ill and perished not long after taking residence at the house. Now, the slave's dying wish was for his body to be returned to Nevis, so that he could rest in his homeland. He also issued a warning that if the Pinney family did not honour this instruction, he would make sure that Bettiscombe Manor would have no peace. The Pinneys ignored this expensive request, and instead had the slave buried in the cemetery of the local church. Now everything was fine at first, but over the coming months, the slave proved true to his word. Great screams could be heard by passing townsfolk, emanating from the freshly filled-in grave. Meanwhile, at the house, the Pinney family fared no better. Wailings were heard here too, accompanied by bangs and crashes that lasted all hours of the night. They dug out the slave's bones and brought these back to the house in an effort to appease the man, and once they did so, the paranormal activity stopped. The skull was placed up in the attic, and for a while it stayed there, although today I hear it now rests in a bureau. I'm sure if you paid the house a visit, they'd gladly show it to you. Huh? Perhaps not then. In any case, a more modern examination of the skull showed that it is in fact the skull of a female, some 3,000 years old, as opposed to a mere few hundred. So, who really knows what happened to the slave and his body? I feel this fact raises many questions and, quite frankly, answers none. Now that you're aware of these tales, do you think it's wise to call the police? At best, you'll probably be charged with wasting police time, and at worst, well, there are some things in the shop that you certainly wouldn't want to be exposed to, and I'm not above reaching into my bag of tricks. Good. Since your silence is secured, feel free to leave. I must say you've taken this all fairly well, better than I was expecting if I'm being honest. Do feel free to come back again, if the mood so takes you. I'm in need of a more, willing assistant, as it so happens, and there could be an opening. For now, though, farewell. Good luck on the walk home.